I'd like to call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you'd please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remind those of you who are in the audience this evening, if you'd please sign in the back, that would be greatly appreciated. In addition to your agenda and your support material this evening, you also have a, what would you call this, Mr. Campbell, a topography of the Karpinski property adjacent to Henry Street and Monroe that I think Mr. Gearbaugh would like to discuss. Is that correct, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yes.
So we'll add that as a discussion item after sidewalk survey and enforcement. Mr. Burgoyne.
Yeah, I would like to add two discussion items. One of them is maintenance, and the other is media reporting.
Media reporting?
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Rowe, clarification, this is for discussion with the real estate lease.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, so it's not a discussion item.
No,
It
it's
will
not
be.
separate.
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay. My apologies. So actually, then there are only two additions to the discussion portion of our agenda this evening: maintenance and media reporting, which have been added by Mr. Burgoyne. Okay. Is there a motion then to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Roth. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries. Next, we'll need a motion to excuse the absence of Councilmember Linda Tahar.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gearbaugh, seconded by Mr. Peters. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Next, we are going to do some presentations, the Youth of the Year nominees. And if Mr. Gearbaugh and Mr. Roth would join me up front. Mr. Roth is the current council liaison to the Youth Council beginning in January, and Mr. Gearbaugh was the representative on the Youth Council prior to January. Okay. Well, welcome. And first of all, I want to give a shout out to Jody Roberts, wherever she may be, for her assistance in preparing this little recognition for you all this evening. So this is the 11th year that the Saline Youth Council has participated in the Saline Chamber of Commerce Saline Salutes Award Program, which honors outstanding citizens in the Saline community. Nominees are recognized for their volunteer efforts and should fulfill these requirements: that they initiate change to better the Saline community, sustained participation in extracurricular activities in the last few years, and that it's not benefited them financially by volunteering. This year, the Saline Youth Council received a record number of nominations for this prestigious award, 14 in all. It was a very difficult decision for the selection committee to choose one award winner from these exceptional young people. Sarah Chu, a Saline senior, was selected the 2013 Youth of the Year and was honored last Friday at the Saline Salutes award ceremony. Tonight, we are fortunate to honor all of the 2013 Youth of the Year nominees. They are the best of the best in leadership, academics, music, sports, volunteerism, and community involvement. And they have shown us already how they are preparing to be leaders of tomorrow, and we expect great things from all of you. Jody, if you also want to come up. We have some certificates here. Okay. And when I read your names, if you would come forward. Unfortunately, some were not able to attend the council meeting tonight. For those in attendance, like I said, when I read your name, if you would please come forward. So first was our Youth of the Year, Sarah, if you'd like to come forward. She's not here. Okay. All right. What about Peyton Cooper? Yeah? Congratulations. And what about, yeah, why don't we all, yeah. Just stay up here till the very end. What about Grant Geiger? Is he in the audience? Yeah. Congratulations. Sorry about that, Jody. Okay. What about Allison Conlins? Not here? Okay. What about Kristen Green? Yeah. Very good. Congratulations. Yep. Kelly Hall? Kelly here? Congratulations. And Kelly actually introduced Sarah at Saline Salutes on Friday evening, and I was very impressed by her public speaking abilities. So, job well done. What about Emily Lau? Is Emily here? No? Okay. What about Aaron Leonard? Congratulations. Yep. Shannon O'Flynn? Shannon here?
Shannon's mom, come on up.
Nice of you to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for her. Thank you for her.
Okay. What about Isabella Procaccini? Not here? Okay. Help me with this last name here, Melissa.
Uncle G.
Is Melissa here? Come on up, Melissa. Congratulations. Okay. What about Lindsay Walter? Lindsay? Congratulations. What about Delphine Wu? Delphine, excuse me. Congratulations. And last but not least, Natalie Wazaki. Is Natalie here? Not here. Okay. Well, we will get the certificates to those young people who are not here. But again, one, congratulations. Thank you for all you do in the Saline community. You know, I mentioned on Friday night at Saline Salutes that there are so many things that make Saline an exceptional place, and this really is an exceptional community. And that's in no small part due to city government. And government can do great things in people's lives. And if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't be serving as mayor. But more importantly, this community is great because of its citizens. And I think you all prove that regardless of your age, you can contribute something tangible and make a positive difference in your community. So give these young people one more round of applause. Thank you again for being with us this evening. Obviously, you're welcome to attend the entire city council meeting. I can be honest with you, it's a little dry even for me, and I'm running it. But you're welcome to stay, and again, congratulations. Thank you all. Okay, moving on. Next up on the agenda is a presentation from Nancy Crisp regarding the 2012 Farmers Market and the budget for 2013. Nancy, if you'd like to come forward.
I assume this is on, right?
I believe it is, yep.
Okay, you have the figures in front of you. It's kind of hard for me to talk about math when I'm in front of a group. I'll do my best. I have to be at my desk. We're staying within budget. That's the good news. There's one little tiny error. I caught it at the last minute. The profit for the Saturday market is actually $42, not $32. I made an addition error. That's the only change.
Nancy, if I could stop you real quick. Actually, we did not receive budget information. So if you could actually, you feel free to continue your presentation. But do you have a comment?
Yeah, no, That was staff's fault.
Okay.
Nancy did provide, and
Okay.
apparently we didn't get it to the clerk's office, so I apologize.
Okay, we'll make sure it's emailed out or at a minimum put in
Yep.
your packets, but
Yep.
please continue. I apologize, Nancy.
Oh, okay. So there was a slight profit in the Saturday market of $42, and then on the Tuesday market, a profit of $162. Now, the winters is still actually going on at this point, but the profit looks like it's going to be $500 or more. So we're doing fine. I did spend a fair amount on signs this last year, and I think maybe I budgeted a little more for signs this next year than I really need. But I always am trying to think of ways to advertise. And this last year, or for the winter market, I did a direct mail, which is expensive, and it's hard to know, you know, what the response I get. So I'm always trying to figure out how to advertise for our markets. What else might you want to know? The income for the winter market looks like it's going to be more, like $1,000 more than last year. The winter market is growing quite nicely. The other two markets they're up, but they're not up a whole lot. There's just so much space I have at these markets. But they're doing well. I think it's good. Now, do you not have the budget either? Oh,
We do not.
okay. The budget, well, what can I say? I think I'm just budgeting, I sort of follow how much I've brought in this year and try to kind of stay within that area. In some ways, I've taken the figure from the annual or the seasonal rate down and put more in the daily rate. I'm finding that my vendors are saving a little money by saying, I'm not sure if I want to commit to the entire season. We're still getting plenty of vendors that do commit, so it's still very good. We are projecting about $1,800 to run the bridge card program again. We're going to give it another try, although last year we only brought in about $120. I'm going to see if I can do a lot more advertising and just see if the city can support this bridge card program, because it's expensive to run and we don't get any income from it. I'm hoping that that's the case, but I just don't know. Seems like other cities get a lot more people to do that. Let's see. And the only other thing that I'm requesting is to raise my hourly rate $1 an hour from $17 to $18. I realize that I've had one increase in 13 years, or is it 14 years? So it just seems like it's time to do that $1. And I think that's, it's hard to think of things that you might want to know. Any questions? You might if you had, well, maybe you wouldn't, even if you had the figures.
Mr. Burgoyne?
Yeah, I know that Nancy Crisp has been doing a great job for many years. And I also know that this budget is part of the EDC functions under the EDC budget. The only question I have is not for Nancy, but why are we going through this in micromanagement style? I think what we should get is notices of special events that have to do with the farmer's market and promote the farmer's market. But I don't think we should go in this kind of detail and need to have her come and justify stuff. I don't see the need for it. I think it's not a good use of this council's time. It's good to promote the market. Anything that has to do with it that we can do to help, that would be fine. But I don't think this kind of review is helpful or good.
Okay, additional comments, questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
For Nancy, with Pittsfield opening up their new potential farmer's market, do you see any draw on our vendors, or we might lose any, or just more competition seems to be happening? Is there anything?
No, it's a Thursday night, and so I had a couple vendor, one vendor in particular say, I'm going to go to that one also, but I haven't had anybody go there instead of ours. It's a new market, we don't know. I hope they're successful, but it is a Thursday night, and ours are Saturday and Tuesdays.
Good. I'm just hoping that we remind everybody to come to our market and let Pittsfield do their own thing.
Markets are getting very popular, and I'm having to really think about how our market's going to go. I mean, what if we get bigger business, and then then what do we have to do to draw on the vendors and draw? We haven't had to do that. You know, I've had waiting lists. This year it's not quite as long, but we have our regulars coming back, and we're a small town. We want our market to stay small and really service everybody, and I think that's what it does. So we'll see what happens. There's a lot of markets going on.
Just one other comment.
Yep, Mr. Gearbox.
That's correct. EDC does review your budget, and we just reviewed it last week, and so
Right.
I was fine with that.
Yeah, you get the income.
Yep.
You don't get all the expenses and everything, but there it's the income.
Right.
Mr. Rhodes?
I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge Nancy Crisp's efforts on behalf of the farmers markets, the 3 of them that we have year-round now in the community. And I personally, I don't have any concerns at all about more farmers markets coming to be. I think it's a great thing. It supports our local farmers and other vendors and encourages people to eat better, healthier, fresher foods, and all of that is really good stuff. So, and then in response to Mr. Burgoyne's comment, I would not look at this as a justification of the budget, but more of reporting on the market, similar to the other programs and activities that we have in the community that get reported on from time to time. So I'm glad that Nancy came to talk to us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we could always streamline it.
Mr. Peters?
I just want to say thank you for the report and thanks for all your hard work. And when do you plan to move outside again?
May 4th.
May
The
4th.
first Saturday in May.
Okay, great.
And it's going to be a
Thanks.
beautiful day, I hope.
Mr. Burgoyne?
Yeah, I agree actually with Dave on, coming forward and reporting and talking about the markets and stuff like that. I don't think we need to get into the micro details of, how many signs cost what or whatever. It's the details that I don't think, if it could be just streamlined and promote it, that'd be great.
Well, let me sort of echo the sentiments of Mr. Rhodes. First of all, thank you for your efforts. You do an extraordinary job, and it's
Thank
greatly
you.
appreciated. Not only I'm not only speaking on behalf of the City Council, but I think the entire community. And additionally, I hope that you don't feel we're nitpicking or trying to micromanage your operations. I think it's very helpful for you to come forward annually and present a budget and to talk about the farmers market and its success. And I think I'm confident that you spending 10 minutes of your time is not too onerous, because I think this is very helpful. So again, thank you for your efforts. Appreciate you being here this evening.
Thank you.
Are there additional questions? No? Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay, last we have our monthly presentation from Main Street. I'd like to welcome Dorothea Mago Darling forward. I know that Cindy and Bob, who usually present, are, I believe, in the Big Easy today.
They are indeed, yes.
So-
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm here. I'm Bob Rosenberger this evening. Bob and Cindy, as their positions oblige them to do, are attending the annual National Main Street Convention in New Orleans. And we hope they are learning lots and having a great time as well. I'm sure they are. I believe you have in your agenda papers a report from each of the 4 teams in Main Street, the Business and Economic Success team, the Design team, the Organization team, and the Promotions team. Rather than go through all of the details that you have read or can read yourselves, I'll just highlight some of the main events over this last month since the last report was made to you. One of the big events was a move to new offices. We are now located at 131 East Michigan Avenue, next to Downtown Diner. It's a much larger space. It allows us to hold meetings there. Before, we had some difficulty with the larger groups in our previous office. So it's a very happy move. We did that over the Easter weekend. Fundraising over the last month, in addition to the government city support that Saline Main Street receives, another $1,625 were raised in corporate and individual contributions. Bee Bloomin' is underway. You all know about that. It's been a regular feature for Saline for some years, as I understand. The plants are, even as we speak, growing in their baskets. Sponsorship is again $75 for a basket. Forms are out. You can also sign up via the Saline Main Street website. I've got a few here, which I'll leave on the table back there as well. Also in March, the Chamber held a franchising expo, which was very well attended. Saline Main Street had a table at that event, and we tried to organize a bit of a pilot opportunity tour, as we called it. The idea behind that was to profile the Main Street downtown businesses or locations that are available for rent or sale for businesses to locate in. It was a pilot. The idea was it was a lousy day, that we might have a walk around with whoever was interested to those properties. That didn't happen in the event, but we did have an info packet that we put together. We are hoping to do this again, promote it more heavily when the weather is nicer, in conjunction or following a farmer's market day. So there are some great synergies, I think, not only for Saline Main Street, but for lots of organizations that come off the success that our farmers market is. And I believe Cindy has spoken, or Bob, with Nancy about the possibility of doing some joint promotion. So Saline Main Street is very much looking at that too with the farmers market and other organizations and events in the community. Upcoming events. Music Under the Arch, there are 2 more performances before that wraps up. The next one is on Thursday this week, April 18. Mac Pods and Ann Arbor Jam Band. They're doing a Miles Davis tribute, so please get word out to all and sundry. And the last for the season is on May 16, Joan Belgrave, a Detroit jazz and blues singer. Thereafter, we will have our summer music series. The programs are all set, the bands are all booked, acts are all booked, and postcards promoting the series will be available for distribution, I think, the 1st of May. The design team has a major event coming up, Building Basics Workshop on April 29 at 6 p.m. upstairs in Mangiamo. This is a workshop that is being put on by Michigan Main Street. The professionals there in design are coming here. It's open to the public, and it's the kickoff for an opportunity that we have as a Main Street community to have 3 building facade rehabilitation designs done. And which 3 buildings those might be will be via application and then decision by committee. But we really want to get our building owners and downtown people and general public involved and invited and coming to this event on the 29th. Information about the event, like everything else I'm mentioning, is on the Saline Main Street website. Michigan Main Street also is going to be in town for 3 days in June, June 25 to 27. Part of the general Main Street program, it's the resource team visit. There will be extensive interviews with stakeholders in the city. There will be information gathered, provided. I don't know all of the details about the visit, but it's something that the Main Street team here is working very closely with Michigan Main Street on to plan well. Other activities a bit further out into the future. The promotion team has a number of great events coming up. The Mastodon Mayhem Run will be held in conjunction with the Celtic Festival now, which is a great, again, great synergies. It'll replace the 5K run that usually takes place for that event. Wicked Kickin' Hoedown, that is scheduled to take place on October 26th. Planning, as I understand it, is going very well for that as well. Winterfest 2014, the first planning meeting for that will be held on May 13 at 5:30 p.m. Another design team project is the alley project, to the beautification of the alleyway behind Brecken Grill, Mangiamo. The action at the moment is discussions with the high school, Saline High School, to get the welding program involved in building the arch, which is going to have some design relationship to the arch on the other side of the street. So we're hoping that that will come off. You heard previously from Bob that Saline has been awarded a market analysis study. This is a $20,000 to $30,000 study in value, which Michigan Main Street has granted to us. Consultants who've worked all over the country on these kinds of projects will be working with us. That doesn't kick off until August, September. But prior to that, the Business and Economic Success team has been working on massaging a survey. We've had some very good stakeholder feedback over the last few months. And we hope to actually get that survey out to our downtown business community. This is to get some data, basic statistics, and again, another look at what do you think we need to do with our downtown. In May, in other words, prior to that resource visit, so that it becomes something that is that feeds into our market analysis study. And finally, the org team and Saline Main Street generally, we are still actively seeking individuals to contribute to our 1,000 Friends campaign and corporate sponsorships for those corporations that are interested in being sponsors. Any questions?
Thank you, Dorothea. Any questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Gearboss.
Just real quick, some of the presentations that we're doing, is there any chance that the one that's going to be done up at Mangiamo's could be taped for like a podcast or anything like that, or somebody could
That's a
record
good
it?
idea. Yes, I'll
For
make a
later.
note of that and see whether that's planned. If not, then, yeah, I think that's a
Okay.
good idea.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Dorothea.
Thank you very much.
Before we move on the agenda, friends, I wanted to bring up something because a few of us had a discussion at Michigan Municipal League at the Capitol Convention this past Wednesday, and actually Cindy Zhubko was present at that event. We think that a few of us think that the monthly presentations, or the presentations in general from Michigan Main Street, or for Saline Main Street, excuse me, are helpful and beneficial. But maybe presentations monthly is a little bit too much, and that maybe the presentations would resonate a little bit more if they were done quarterly or maybe every other month. So I offer that before you as a suggestion, as a thought, and if we wanted to proceed, we would have to do a slight modification, to the agreement terms that we have with Saline Main Street. But again, I personally think maybe every other month or 4 times a year would be appropriate. Mr. Gearbaugh.
I don't have a problem with having a quarterly report on the financial aspect of it, but I think the monthly thing might be a good thing for them to promote so that it's actually on our, if there's promotions or events or things going on, they would have at least once a month, they might be able to present that, but that's just a suggestion.
Okay.
I
Mr.
think
Rhodes?
Quarterly reports are fine, and when there are special events, certainly you can come and let us know about it.
Okay. Mr. Roth?
I'm in agreement with it that their special events can be listed as far as announcements, so we can go at quarterly meetings.
Okay. Mr. Peters? You're fine with
Oh, yes, oh, yeah.
quarterly meetings? Mr. Burgoyne?
I agree with Mr. Rhodes.
Okay. All right. Well, then, we'll proceed then. We seem to have some consensus to modify that language. And then, of course, if Main Street does have special events or programs they would like to promote, in addition to their quarterly report to council, they would be encouraged to do so. Okay? Very good. Thank you all. We move on now to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but not required, to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, 600 Canterbury. As I've been here numerous times to talk on the unsafe sidewalks that we have in the city of Saline. When we were going through the budgets, and I in the audience, I noticed that $50,000, apparently sidewalk projects have been postponed. I have submitted a concern, and Ms. Buchanan also, Mrs. Buchanan, on the ordinances that say shall, and letters that will be presented. And I've requested that our city attorney please address this, the one that would have to do with this. Apparently, it was brought to my attention that we have some other sidewalks that are much worse. I have pictures if you want them. But I'm hoping that on behalf of the taxpayers that you will ask our attorney where we are as taxpayers and as liability. Also, I do want to make a comment, Mr. Burgoyne. When those little things come up, it is the taxpayers' money that you are addressing, and I appreciate the reports, and it isn't to question the farmers market, it is taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. Are there any other citizen comments on agenda items? No? Okay. Then moving on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Is there a motion?
I'd like to move to approve.
Move to approve by Mr. Peters. Is there a second?
Support.
Support by Mr. Rhodes. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Moving on to public hearings, agenda item 13-56. This is an application from Quantum Signal for an extension of IFT 2011-291. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the February 26, 2013 letter from Quantum Signal and the April 9, 2013 memo from Administrative Finance Assistant Korfman regarding the recommendation on IFT exemption certificate, number 2011-291, extension request from Quantum Signal, LLC. Is there a motion?
Move to acknowledge.
Move to acknowledge by Mr. Burgoyne. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Mr. Gearbaugh. Mr. Corfman, would you like to make a statement?
Quantum Signal is an advanced engineering research and development firm who purchased the former Union School to accommodate the firm's continued growth. In May 2011, they applied for and received a tax abatement for $200,000 of real property and $215,600 of personal property. The personal property portion of the IFT has been completed. However, the real property portion is incomplete at this time. The IFT application stated a construction period of March 1st, 2011 through February 28, 2013. On February 28, 2013, City Clerk Hill received a request to extend Quantum Signal's construction end date to February 28, 2014, due in part to a high volume of client activity that prevented them from moving forward with the planned improvements to their building. The State Tax Commission allows companies to obtain an additional year to complete construction as outlined in State Tax Commission Rule 53, as long as the extension request is received within the final year of the construction period. Quantum Signal's request for an extension was received during the final year of the construction period, making them eligible for a one-year extension. City staff is recommending that Saline City Council approve the one-year construction period extension request for Quantum Signal.
Thank you, Ms. Corfman. Are there any questions? Mr. Burgoyne.
Well, I think we should support this. Quantum Signal has been an excellent corporate citizen. I know they support Main Street. They've supported children's programs and probably other things in the community. They do exciting work, signal processing, robotics, and other high-tech stuff. We're fortunate to have them at Union School.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Burgoyne. Mr. Roth.
I was wondering if you knew what they have not completed?
Mr. Rhodes, do you want to step up for that?
So much. What we've planned to do over the past couple of years, and sadly we haven't completed yet, is amongst other things, try to improve the facade as it faces the parking lot. We have some internal things, like for instance, the entryway where we don't have a spot for, there's no reception area in the school, for instance, because generally it was a school and it wasn't intended to be at a corporate reception. The facade facing the parking lot is kind of a little bit in, well, let's just say not as good shape as I would hope to face clients, and so we're hoping to improve that. Over the past several years, we've spent a lot of time. There are kind of two reasons. One is as she was saying, that we've been very, very busy over the past few years trying to get settled and handle a lot of clients, as well as we've invested quite a bit of money in trying to repair things that we hadn't anticipated. And though we took the school on in the spirit of, we knew that it was in let's say, fair to Midland shape, there has been a substantial amount of investment that we hadn't planned on in terms of heating, cooling, and those sorts of things to repair it. And thus, a lot of the funds that we had allocated toward construction at those time went to those repairs, and we just got tied up. And so, we're hoping this year, this summer, while the weather is nice, to try to make those improvements and go from there.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, sir.
Additional questions for either Ms. Corfman or the applicant? No? Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Now I need a motion to, we need to vote on the motion to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Now I need a motion to open the public hearing, affording the applicant and all taxing units an opportunity to be heard.
So moved.
It's been moved by Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Peters. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. This public hearing is now open. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person.
Mary Hess, normally this would come to the commission as far as for tax abatements and IFTs, but I think this is a great motion, and I'm glad that they've came to Saline, and I would support it as a commission member and as a taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. Are there any other public comments?
Move to close.
It's been moved by Mr. Gearba to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Roth. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. This public hearing is now closed. Now I'll need a motion to approve and adopt or not adopt the resolution approving Quantum Signal LLC's request for an extension of time to complete construction and installation of industrial property as submitted.
Move to approve and adopt.
Second.
It's been moved by Gearba to approve and adopt, seconded by Mr. Burgoyne. Any comments? I would just echo the comments made by Mrs. Hess and Mr. Burgoyne. Mitch, you are one of our most valued corporate citizens. We appreciate the investment in the community, and we hope that you are successful in perpetuity. So thank you very much. Okay. If there are no further comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Moving on to unfinished business, item 13-36. This is a commercial sale listing agreement with Swisher Commercial. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the April 11th, 2013 memo from City Manager Campbell to authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the commercial listing agreement with Swisher Commercial as submitted for the listing and sale of city properties outlined in the agreement, with all sales to come before City Council for final approval. Is there a motion?
I'll move to acknowledge receipt of the memo
Okay.
only.
Mr. Gearba is going to begin by acknowledging receipt of the memo. Is there a second?
Second.
To acknowledge receipt. Seconded by Mr. Burgoyne. Mr. Gearba, do you want, since you were the one who requested the topography and outline of the Karpinski property, do you want to begin by asking some questions?
Yeah, really my question was, the way that we're advertising this, I just want to clarify on that property that we've identified, and Mr. Campbell assures me we'll do that, but whatever we recognize as being the property that we're going to put up for sale excludes whatever land that we're keeping for the parking, for the People's Park and that everything, and that area. So I'm not sure if what's listed takes that into account.
I think Mr. Campbell is able to answer that question, Mr. Gearba.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, absolutely. We don't currently, if you recall, the hope is that if council, as they consider this tonight, if they approve the agreement, then staff would be meeting with Swisher, Mr. Caparisi, to come up with a value for that property, because that's of all the properties that the city has for sale, that does not have a value for sale that has been determined. So that was the plan, to bring that back at the next meeting. And certainly, as we've had discussions before, absolutely, our staff's proposal would be to maintain the current portion that of that property that we currently use for parking for People's Park. We would take that, remove that, so we separate that out. And I believe, Mr. Fordyce, was that .08? You did a quick calculation approximately. I think it was certainly less than an acre. As staff was talking about this internally, to reduce the amount of the 3.5 acres by, I know it's less than an acre, but.
Yeah, there were a couple of different sketches that we put together for parking scenarios. There's the existing one, which is basically, I think, a 50-foot swath down the whole southern edge. And then I put together two other scenarios that reduced the amount of land that we needed for parking. I did meet with the Baseball Association to get an idea of what their parking needs are and where it would best suit them. So put together the smallest area where we could fit that many cars and try to maintain as large a parcel as possible to sell. And then actually held on to another strip along to the north edge of the baseball field, because over the years we've kind of occupied further north with our baseball activities.
Yeah, with the agreement I see right now, it lists 3.529, which is really the whole parcel. So I would change in the commercial listing to say to be determined, if that's true. But the only thing is, I want to make sure that we keep an adequate amount, because we don't want to go ever back trying to buy more back. And at this time, since we own it, let's do it right and make sure that we've got any easements or whatever that we may need in the future for any sewers or anything else or potential in there.
Yeah. I believe the parking area that we sketched out was 25 spaces.
I also just would like to add, Mr. Fordyce made a suggestion from his department. As you'll see in the attached pictures, see 4 parcels. 209 is the number in red, and those are actually between the easterly end of the property on Monroe Street, and then they back up. I mean, it's pretty steep. I mean, so they're not really usable, but they do back up to properties that front on Marcana Court. But currently, for the last several years, we essentially the city mows those, but we mow them. So the thought is to potentially add those on to the piece that we're talking about right now, the former, as we used to call it, the Karpinski property. Add those 4 pieces on. I mean, that could potentially, depending on the development, that could help out with setbacks, those types of things, maybe. But anyway, so that we would, since we're having this discussion, that's why I bring it up, and we would bring that back at the next meeting as part and parcel, as we look at, give a proposed value on that property, if that seems reasonable to you all.
Mr. Gearbaum?
Just really, who owns 228? Does that back up to I can't tell on this map.
Yeah.
At the end of Marcana.
Yeah.
It's right next to the 4 lots that you mentioned.
I think that's an easement.
People's Park.
I think
Is that is the park?
that goes down.
Yep.
I was just trying to, however, we had to square off that lot to make it a sellable lot, but also retain our thing. That's why I'm kind of saying that in this agreement, we keep it as a TBD in order to make sure, because I'm sure there might be some concerns with property owners that back up to those other lots if they're going to be sold, so we might want to take that into consideration.
Did you have any follow-ups, Mr. Gearbaum?
Nope.
No? Mr. Burgoyne?
Jeff, didn't we also have an option of going south of the daycare for parking? And how does that fit this picture?
We do own the area south of the daycare building, has frontage on Monroe Street.
Couldn't that be less expensive than going all the way to the back with parking over here and leaving this a better piece, just retaining what you need near the baseball area where we've encroached?
It's an option. It certainly is an option. I know in the Parks Master Plan, there was a sketch of a parking area in that spot. I think the benefit to holding on to a part of the parcel under discussion is that people are used to parking there. You know, it's been used for parking for many years, whereas the rest of that southern portion of People's Park has been more of an open space, quiet enjoyment kind of area. But it's an option.
I would prefer parking be established south of the daycare near the basketball courts. And I think people would get used to established parking. That's my thought.
Mr. Peters?
Yeah, I thought we talked about this back on March 4th. We agreed to accept Swisher as the agent, but I think a few of us had some issues with the percentage, 10%. At that time, we agreed to maybe make some changes in the policy that they presented that would say that modify that in some way, or perhaps the city council would negotiate a price. Some of these parcels are quite expensive, and I was hoping for maybe some kind of a flex rate where, maybe Swisher could make 7% on the first couple $100,000 and then 4% on the balance of that purchase. I don't know. I'm not so sure I'm prepared to support this tonight at 10%. I think I've talked to some other agents and I've researched a little bit, and I think it's a little bit on the high side, and it is the citizens' money. So that's my comment. I don't know whatever happened we were to do something on March 4th with the policy. I thought we were supposed to change that in some fashion. Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, we want to comment.
No, I agree with that.
No, my understanding was staff was to meet with Swisher and discuss proposed contract terms, and which we did, and this is what we came up with. So.
Okay. Well, I don't have a problem with Swisher or the people involved, but I do have a problem with 10%.
Mr. Burgoyne?
I don't have a problem with 10% on the residential parcel. I I would hope that you'd sell a residential parcel through a residential broker instead of Swisher Commercial. But if the rest of the council wants to kind of use an electrician for a plumber's job, that's okay. But I agree on the percentage. The total of these properties is about $3 million, and 10% of $3 million is quite a lot. And especially this residential piece, I don't have a problem being at 10% because open residential land often is at 10%. I don't have a problem with that. But large parcels like the 17.26 acres next to Reinhardt, across from the barn, that's going to go for a lot of money, especially if we do something that's compatible with the look there. So I thought that 6%, I thought staff was going to go back and work on this, but we just have the same thing as the original proposal, which I don't think is any change at all. I agree. I think it should be maybe 10% on the residential parcel, but 6% on the rest. I don't like a complicated approach, just something pretty straight, but I think 6% would be better.
As far as changes, there were changes of length of contract. Those were the changes in the proposed contract language. Initially, they were asking for a 2-year commitment, and we reduced that to 12 in 6 months, and then 60 days if we were to sell a property within 60 days after, if we were to terminate the agreement.
I want to kind of pivot back here because we can debate the merits of the proposal in the subsequent motion, but right now we do have a motion on the floor to acknowledge receipt. So if there are no further comments or questions for Mr. Campbell and Mr. Ford, yes, sir.
Excuse me. I just wanted to restate that I will abstain from any discussion or voting.
Okay, appreciate that. Mr. Caparizzi, do you care to make any comment at all?
I'd be happy to answer any additional questions. I would just reiterate and reinforce what the city manager indicated, that we did have a meeting, and there was an opportunity for the city, represented by the manager, to raise any questions or issues. After some additional consideration by myself and by my senior broker, we feel and we believe today that 10% on industrial land, particularly in these times, is more than justified. When you look at the total acreage, it seems like it is a large dollar volume, and I hope to be the one to actually sell that property over time. But that's what you're looking at, is you're looking at a lot of time, both initially and what will likely culminate in perhaps a sale. I think perhaps I was quoted last time is in the paper that I thought all of this property would be sold in 6 to 18 months, and I think that what I intended to say, if I didn't say it, is that we may not see anything for 6 to 18 months for a single property. Each of these properties, as I reviewed it with Mr. Campbell, have their own unique intricacies. Some of the property, some of the acreage is not buildable, so that you end up with a net buildable area that maybe is 50% or less of what the acreage is that's there. The market's still extremely difficult, and if you just by your own experience can see that there really has not been any development we're starting to see residential development come around. Some of the neighborhoods that were left incomplete with the infrastructure already in the ground, we've seen a lot of developers come and take those, pick those up and build homes. But on the industrial side, there really hasn't been any development. And in the Saline industrial parks, I believe I probably had one of the 2 last deals that there was actual construction. That was a sheer Trier deal in 2004. I would remind the council that at that time, and even up till today on your own website, the offered commission is 10%. I don't think that number was just picked out of thin air. There is a lot that goes into researching, developing the listing information, responding to, and generating leads and responding to leads. And that's just an inkling of what's involved once you have a potentially serious candidate for coming to the community to build an industrial complex. From that point on, you're still probably looking at, the Shearer Trier deal I worked on for 2.5 years before it became to fruition. So, when you take that amount of time and then you spread out whatever the commission is that may have been earned over that amount of time, from my standpoint, it's really not as much as it may appear to be, considering that as brokers we work on 100% commission, and from that commission we take out all of our carrying costs, our development costs, and other expenses. And so, again, I reiterated to Mr. Campbell that we were firm on the 10%, and at this point I'm personally very excited and enthusiastic about getting started on this project, and I hope the council will approve the project, and let's get started.
Thank you, sir. There are questions. Mr. Burgoyne.
In industrial new construction right now is not attractive to some investors that can get existing facilities for cheaper than build new on industrial land. So I can see from that point of view that 10% is more attractive to a broker to represent this type of property. The one exception to that is the 17.26 acres on Michigan Avenue. And I also see that the raw land, the residential deserves 10%. I see that. But on the piece that's on Michigan Avenue, if the city were to make that available for something other than industrial, something more compatible with Michigan Avenue, and something that would sell a lot faster, is that a place in which you could negotiate the commission on a 17-acre piece?
Probably not, Lee. The scenario that you described, you and I discussed it a little bit early on. I think it would be terrific if the city could take a look at that zoning and build some flexibility into what may be able to put in there. But, there are some challenges. You have, I believe, the industrial facilities, or the TIF tax increment financing with the state that's encompasses all of that Salt Trail Industrial Park.
Although that doesn't block a zoning use. Other than that, you just can't capture taxes.
Okay.
So it doesn't block the use.
Yes.
You just can't capture the taxes.
Right.
And in the future, we won't get personal property anyway. We won't get the equipment. So
right.
It won't really matter. So making it something that will better serve the citizens and look better on Michigan Avenue and sell better, wouldn't that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. But it's all relative. It'll make it sell quicker. You're still looking at probably an amount of time that will exceed my initial listing term, which is 12 months. And what I bank on is there's nothing unusual about a listing agreement expiring. We deal with those every day, and what I bank on is to be able to demonstrate and show my client that I'm doing the job, and if they're happy with how I'm marketing the property and showing it and bringing them deals or not bringing them deals, it's up to them to decide to renew it or not. And more often than not, we get extensions, and that's what I would anticipate and hope that would happen here.
Additional questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Raw?
Are we having this discussion only as far as acknowledging receipt?
That's the only motion on the floor at this moment.
Okay, I have discussion later on.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion regarding the acknowledgement of the receipt of the memo dated April 11th, 2013? No, then it's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Does that mean if I say aye, I accept the 10%?
No, you're just acknowledging receipt.
Okay. Aye.
Let me ask for that vote one more time. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Okay, the subsequent motion will be to authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the commercial listing agreement with Swisher Commercial as submitted. for the listing and sale of city properties outlined in the agreement, with all sales to come before the city council for final approval.
I make motion to not authorize.
Okay, there's been a motion
Second.
by Roth not to authorize.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Burgoyne. Okay, discussion. Mr. Roth?
Going back to when we had the committee making selections and the bidding process, I'm not too sure if there was, the selection committee, I'm not sure why this one was selected. And with the discussion that we had at that time, I thought they would be much more flexible and come back with something different than what we see here, and especially around this 10%.
I want Mr. Campbell to briefly respond to your statement, Mr. Roth, about why the committee decided to recommend Swisher Commercial.
And I would ask Ms. Korfman, in case I missed some of the items, because she was part of the team, based on experience, based on community, based on the experience of Mr. Caparisi, as well as the Swisher Commercial as a firm. I think there was a half a dozen items. Do you recall, Ms. Korfman? But those were, and as we went through, I believe we received 6 proposals from the RFP, and that's what was a unanimous decision from the review team. I mean, I think the review team spent some good quality time to review those and discuss those proposals and to come up with a recommendation to City Council.
Mr. Burgoyne?
I think I agree with Swisher as being a good firm for this type of property and so forth. And I agree that Tony has been active in this community himself. I just think that 10%, a lot of the respondees put 10%, and we did have 10% on the website, but our prices on the website were fairly high, and that's so that we could negotiate with someone to decide whether we wanted to sell it to them or not and come down in our price somewhat. I'd be happier with a compromise like 8%. I would support that at that point. I see that there's at least 3 people here that are not satisfied with 10%. I'd rather not see something complicated where it's so much and then it's so much and then it's so much again. Just one number would be better. And I'd be happier for the residential property to not be included in this, but go through a residential firm. But if everybody else wants it included, go along with it. But I'd be happy with 8%. I'm looking for a compromise. I didn't see any change. And I think especially if we make a change to Michigan Avenue to make that into a more compatible piece, that will help to sell that. And that's going to be at least $2 million right there. And $160,000 on $2 million is $40,000 the city's saving, but I think 8% is better. So that's my thought.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
One of my things is I want to see this land sold. We can talk 2% change, 10%, but the faster we get this on the tax rolls, the more better we're off. And I do agree, if we're going to try and change some of these designations for some of this property, we need to look at that, but I don't know how fast that can happen. And the longer we kind of postpone this and we go going back and forth, I'd rather see us, if we sell this land at a fair market price and can get it sold, let's do it. If there's pieces on here that we're seriously talking about changing the whole prospect of how we're going to sell it, they shouldn't be on this agreement. But at this point, we're looking at this as what it's presented right now. I'd rather see if we can sell it, try a month, 12 months on it. We know 1 or 2 of these lots potentially could sell, but at this point, to keep going back and forth, we did have a 10% commission in the previous. We need to move forward on this. So I'm more than willing. Yeah, there may be 2% difference, but that's just nickel and dime. If we can't sell it, we got to sell it.
Well, let me say that I think I share Mr. Gearbaugh's frustrations, because I think one of our strategic goals as a community is to relinquish control of these vacant parcels, because they're ultimately doing the city. They're not benefiting the city, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And the real profound benefit would be moving them from the public sector to the private sector and getting some development, getting some jobs, getting these parcels on the tax rolls. So this proposal, in my judgment, is not perfect. Very few are, but I don't want to let perfection become the enemy of what is good enough. And Swisher Commercial has an outstanding reputation. Their fee is 10%. That's just what their fee is. They came, as Mr. Campbell just articulated, they were unanimously recommended by the committee that reviewed RFPs. And I think that they'll do an outstanding job in a very difficult market. I think that's the key thing that I want to emphasize here. So I'm very much in favor of moving forward. I will not be voting in favor of a motion not to authorize. However, I suspect that with one council member abstaining and one council member absent this evening, there's not going to be 4 votes to move forward either way. So we can still vote on this motion, but just a heads up, folks, that we need 4 votes to carry the day, and I don't see that happening this evening. Therefore, it would have to come back at a subsequent council meeting. Mr. Burgoyne.
I'm not certain that the Swisher's fee being 10% in all cases is accurate, because I suspect that every broker firm out there in the community, in the market, has had fees different from 10%. And I suspect that if we research Swisher, you would find some fees have been different from 10%. They have not always been 10%. So I'm not sure that that's a proper representation, that that's it, and we can't have anything different. So, and would they rather have 8% or nothing?
Mr. Caparisi can come up and comment, but my understanding, and I'm not, first of all, I didn't say that in all cases their fee is 10%. What I articulated was that for this particular proposal, it's 10%. That's what they're offering.
Right, and I, again, just affirm that that would be price fixing, which would be illegal. But typically, commissions are negotiable, and they vary. We don't take this proposal lightly. I didn't take a proposal when it was drafted or presented, or that I'm standing here before you acting like an immovable object. But based on what we have to consider in order to list these properties and promote them and ultimately, hopefully, sell them, we have, again, a lot of upfront costs and time involved. I also want to point out that whatever that commission may be, we also participate in a cooperating broker agreement. So it's very possible, and particularly with marketing a property like this nationally, internationally, that it's very possible that there'll be an outside brokerage firm that could and will represent a potential purchaser, in which case whatever our commission is percentage-wise, automatically half of it gets shared with that other firm. So even in light of that fact, Swisher Commercial will bear the brunt of all of the upfront costs and the carrying costs. That other firm will come along, and who knows, they may very likely have been working with a prospect. They may have taken them all around the country, so they'll too have their upfront costs that they're trying to recoup some of it, and then ultimately be able to make a fair profit on their work. So again, I don't mean to be belligerent or obstinate, but again, this 10% represents what we feel as a brokerage firm is a fair number for the amount of time, work, and effort that will go into marketing these properties. Again, we're not talking about just one property. We will be putting an equal amount of time and effort and resources into 7 different properties. And while one property may or may not ultimately be more attractive and sell, quote unquote, quicker, we'll be putting in a lot of time into packaging and marketing all 7 properties, all 80-something acres. Concerning the Monroe Street property, That's strictly council's call, obviously. My understanding is that that property can potentially be rezoned to commercial, and I think that was the basis that Mr. Campbell and I had discussed that on. If it's strictly, it's currently zoned, I think, multifamily, and that also falls into the category of a lot of our commercial dealings. Perhaps a multi-tenant apartment complex or a condominium complex or a senior center of some type. That property also has its challenges as well. But most properties do, and that's why most people will hire a commercial real estate firm.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Burgoyne?
It looks like you don't have the votes for 10% for an agreement. But I would be willing to withdraw my vote and go to 8%. If you could get an 8% tonight, would you do it?
Yeah, I apologize, and again, I'm not trying to be obstinate here, but I would have to respectfully decline that.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Mr. Peters, do you care to make any comment? You're the only council member that has commented on this motion.
No, I think I've said,
Okay.
made my point.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of a motion moved by Roth, seconded by Burgoyne, not to authorize, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Raise your hands for us. So Burgoyne, Peters, Roth. All those against the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. So Gearba, Morrow. Mr. Rhodes abstains. Ms. Tahar is absent. Motion dies. Okay. That item will come back at the next council meeting.
Maybe looking for direction rejecting that, and obviously Swisher's position is to not move from their number, their 10%. I guess direction from council is needed. Do we just go down the list and bring back the next recommendation?
I would suggest negotiating with them to see if they will come back with a number that's somewhere between the 10 and the 6%. Somebody else mentioned 7%. I just mentioned 8% to try to be in the middle. And if you don't get that, then go to somebody else.
I'm willing to go with another recommendation from the committee that did the selection, if this one doesn't work.
Mr. Gearba.
I don't want to see more delay, just get an agreement, whatever we got to do it. So it's either going back to the drawing board or moving ahead trying to negotiate. So whatever we got to do. This is wasting time of council and wasting time of us getting money back in the books.
Mr. Peters.
Well, it's a lot of money. I think it's worth the time. I don't have any problem with this method. And I think we owe Swisher Company another opportunity to maybe work with us in a different manner with a different percent, and if not, then maybe we have to go with a different firm.
Yeah, I guess, what is that number? What is that percentage that I don't want to bring back 8, and then we don't have enough votes for 8? Even, I mean, that's, well, even if we could get 8. So I've got one person saying 8 and one person saying get it done.
Got a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Gearba.
So if we used 10% before and we had higher value, so why would we want to not, now we're going to basically ask for a lesser value unless we get to change in some of this other property. I'm not sure we're going to be able to sell, and you admitted that we're not going to be able to sell this property at the level that we were selling at before. How did we ever derive a 10% as a commission? If that's what we listed on our website. And this would have been, it's been in place for 10 years, so I think Mr. Burgoyne would probably have more advice on how come we did that.
10% was the highest commission out there, and because we didn't have individual brokers, we offered as high as possible, and we also set the pricing of the land enough to be able to absorb that. and to be able to negotiate.
But then we ended up kicking back a whole bunch of money usually to redevelop it anyway, so we basically weren't getting, my thing is, we're either giving money or we're taking it back, but in the long run, our goal is to sell the land. So if we can sell it at a fair market value, commission's going to be fine if we don't have any of these kickbacks that we used to have, not kickbacks, but incentives that were used for it to develop it or whatever. I think in the long run, it's going to be a wash. So the faster we can set this down without having to worry about money, and if we can get them to sell it, a 10% commission to me just makes it cleaner and easier than going out and having an 8%, and then I don't know what we end up doing in incentives and everything else. So I'm just trying to come down to a net value and just as fast as we can get it out the door, so.
I think that my sentiments are exact to what Mr. Gearbaugh just articulated. I have absolutely no problem with the 10% commission fee. I think that Swisher Commercial has an outstanding reputation. I think we're getting bogged down, and this process is becoming all the more convoluted. And again, the goal should be to move this land, folks. That's got to be a goal of this council, to do it quickly. And we're not talking about not being thorough or not taking into account the concerns of our taxpayers. This process has been very thorough, very deliberate. So, you know, if it's a consensus of council to go back and yet again negotiate with Swisher, I guess do that, and then maybe bring back the other RFPs and proposals from the competing firms. I don't see what the alternative is at this point. Mr. Peters.
The city is struggling for funds. We've decided to sell this property because we need the money, and why not go for the best deal we can get? I think it's worth the time.
Well, the best deal, well, I understand that. The best deal might not be the best outfit to market and leverage the properties. But we obviously have a difference of opinion.
So then, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is we'll have further discussions with Swisher. If we can renegotiate a lesser, hopefully more acceptable commission, we'll do so. If not, then we'll bring back, we'll review the recommendation list and bring back a recommendation of the team, of the review team, for your consideration. That's my understanding.
Everybody clear on that? Yeah, Mr. Burgoyne?
I agree with what you said. I have one difference of opinion, though. I think that industrial land is just not selling now all throughout this area because industry in the United States has lost a lot of jobs, and there's a lot of vacant properties that are being used instead of building new. I think that is a challenge for Swisher or any other firm, and I think Swisher is a good firm. They're among the best firm for this type of commercial stuff. And in fact, if the Monroe Street stuff can be commercial, maybe they're fit there too. I thought it was strictly residential. I think what we need to do is we need to make the land more able to be sold by any broker. So we have to look at the zoning and help the person and help the community, because I don't think that in the future it's going to be a fit to have any pole barn or storage looking buildings or whatever. I don't think that's going to be a fit for this community. Years ago when Petrolube came in, we weren't, at the time, we were getting a lot of personal property support to reduce residential property taxes. But now that's different. We have to think, I think we have to do more beyond just do a sales contract. We have to help the broker and help the community, both.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Okay. You're clear on what the consensus appears to be?
Yes,
okay. All right, then we move on to unfinished business 13-57. This is revised council guidelines. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the proposed revised council guidelines and to approve and adopt or not adopt the revised 4-5-13 council guidelines as submitted.
Move to approve and adopt.
Moved by Rhodes to approve and adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Roth. I just want to state very briefly that Clerk Hill brought this to my attention, that this is really an item that deserves a proper motion, not just approval by consensus. But I want those of you in the audience and those of you who are listening at home to know that these council guidelines were adopted in 2002 to make sure that council members are treating one another with respect, conducting themselves with honor, and asking thoughtful, thorough questions and gathering as much information as possible prior to making a decision. And so at our strategic retreat at the end of 2012, we reviewed the document, we made some changes. Mr. Burgoyne offered a number of amendments that were incorporated into the document. And now we're at the stage of approving an amended version, but we still hope to follow the document and live by them. But I think, I think this is it's a good motion, and I'll support it, and I'm pleased to see that we've made progress on this document over the last several months. So, are there additional comments? No? Okay. Then it's been properly moved and seconded to acknowledge receipt and approve and adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Moving on to new business, item 13-58. This is the Promote Saline project request. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the April 11, 2013 memo from Scott Graydon, Superintendent of Saline Area Schools, and to authorize or not authorize the expenditure of $1,000 to promote the Saline project for development of public relations and marketing strategy tools to be used collaboratively in the Saline community by organizations, government, business, and schools to raise awareness of Saline. Is there a motion?
Motion to acknowledge receipt and to authorize adding the words at the end, with funds to come from EDC Community Promotion Funds.
Support.
EDC, what did you say?
Promotion.
Community promotion. Okay, so it's been properly moved by Mr. Burgoyne, seconded by Mr. Gearbaugh, to acknowledge receipt and authorize with an addendum at the end, which would read, with funds to come from EDC promotion.
Community promotion funds.
Community promotion funds. Is that correct, Mr. Burgoyne?
Yes, that's fine. And the reason for that is that EDC, Economic Development Corporation, promotes the community. That's the reason for their funds and so forth. And also, I don't want to touch the general fund where we want to safeguard the general fund.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Mr. Gearbaugh, you're still comfortable with being the mover of that motion?
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Okay.
I was actually going to suggest that.
Very
Thanks,
good.
Mr. Burgoyne.
Superintendent Graydon, would you care to come up and make a comment and maybe talk a little bit about your memorandum dated April 11th?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And Dorothea is here, kind of representing the group as well, and has been a part of the project as we've gone along. About a year ago, a little over a year ago in April, we got together as a selection of bodies, the school board, the city council, and a few other entities, and talked about kind of what our challenges were and what some of our strengths. And one of the messages that came out of that night was really a concern around how are we going to kind of cooperate and communicate effectively with almost a single voice in terms of some of the issues facing Saline. You talked earlier tonight about some of the economic pressures in our community. And so from that meeting, Cindy Zupko and I have gotten together, and we've gotten a larger group, and City Manager Campbell's been a part of that group, and have been meeting really throughout the last year, looking at various ways that we could try to cooperate and market the greater Saline area in effective ways, and do so in a way where we share the information and share the strategies that we talked about openly and freely with anyone really who wants them, because it's important for us to look at the one voice concept as it relates to Saline. We have a unique opportunity now to kind of leverage some of the resurgence, particularly from my perspective in the area of residential sales, concerns about enrollment and making sure that we're bringing families to Saline, and also leveraging then the recent designation as Saline as a great place to raise kids. So we've worked together. The school has been a partner, Michigan Main Street. We've also worked with the Saline District Library to receive some funds, because again, this is a shared project. Our intention is the total budget for this project to be around $5,000. I have concluded the enclosed packet with the project that we've chosen. The Gen Motion entity has been chosen, and now we're going around and talking to the entities about supporting this with a financial award.
Thank you, Mr. Graydon. there any questions? Mr. Roth?
I wasn't too impressed with the toolbox concept that was put in this proposal, because all of the other promotion plans that we had throughout the city for years had the same thing. What's new in this toolbox?
Well, I think
How's
from-
this gonna be different? I agree with the one voice is fantastic, but I just don't see where we're gonna go ahead with the toolbox as presented.
The concept behind the toolbox really comes from a few different areas. One is various communities have really talked about what are the overriding themes that go beyond what is good for the city, what is good for the schools, and to kind of develop an approach that it could be tailored to any different entity. The other aspect of the toolbox is that it be fully shared. It not be something that perhaps the city were to own or the school were to own. This isn't a school marketing plan, this isn't a city marketing plan, and it's not something that really even goes as far as trying to brand certain aspects. This is an opportunity for us, through a process as outlined in the proposal, to develop a shared theme, and it'd be something we would encourage every, particularly businesses, community, churches, organizations, realtors to use in terms of how they talk about Saline. I agree it's a different concept, and at times can honestly be somewhat of a vague concept. I've struggled at various points to really articulate specifically what that looks like. Tacoma, Washington is an entity we've looked at. Some of the concepts behind Pure Michigan are embedded in what they're talking about doing and what we're looking at doing. It's going to be a process of collecting community voice to make sure the themes are appropriate and resonate across a broad cross-section of the community, and not just a municipal government entity, not just a school government.
Mr. Roth?
This $5,000, is that, this toolbox gonna be the only thing that's gonna we get out of it? And then it's gonna be money on top of that to actually do some of the promotion that the toolbox suggests?
Well, it depends on the different levels. Yeah, as far as the $5,000 will be done to collect and develop the toolbox. As far as a physical, it's not going to be a new project. I'm trying to think of a new we're not talking about printed materials and different things. We're talking about developing a plan that can be shared. Each entity will be, depending to the extent that they're going to be using and leveraging this toolbox, will have expenses associated. For example, the school does promotional materials now. We would incorporate the concepts associated with this development, this proposal, into those existing promotional materials. So whether there will be costs associated, whether they would be new costs, is really up to the individual entities that are involved in the project.
Additional questions, Mr. Roth?
No, I'm just trying to grasp how we're going to get our money's worth.
Okay, very good. Mr. Burgoyne?
I like the work that's been done so far, and my perspective is that it will be good and it will be helpful to have all these agencies sort of going the same way and so forth. I'm supportive of this. That's why I either made the motion or seconded the motion. What I think, though, is in the future, we could continue to support this through EDC if there was some follow-up or something else that was needed, and it would not necessarily need to come to the city council again, unless you wanted to advertise it, which is fine.
Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Mr. Rhodes?
I have a question for City Manager Campbell, actually, if that's appropriate at this point.
Absolutely.
In the packet of information that we got on page 9, the first paragraph in there, there's a sentence which states that the city currently does not have a webmaster available to update their site. If that's an accurate statement, then how do we move forward with utilizing this toolbox?
Well, I mean, we have obviously our Mr. Shonk that does it. We don't have a standalone person. That they just, focus on the website and social media, and which that falls under his umbrella, but so does maintaining all of our IT needs. I mean, we would continue at this point in time. Well, again, as Mr. Graydon said, not exactly sure what is going to come from the toolbox, because the discussions there, part of it's going to be how the tools in the toolbox are determined are going to be from group discussions with the shareholder or the stakeholders. But instead of, my assumption is, at least for the short term, if not long, but at least the short term, we would continue to make the changes and manage our website the way we currently do.
Okay, that was what I assumed would happen, but I didn't know for certain.
I think to speak to that a little bit, I think that's, you articulate really the concept behind what we want to do. Right now, each of us have varying degrees of abilities to maintain and consistently update our websites, our digital presence, and even our marketing materials. If we have a shared theme across the community and throughout the community, it'll allow us to again, create one voice. And so while our information may or may not be updated as quickly as we would like, or the city may have other priorities at a certain time, that voice and that consistent message can be broader, and so that it doesn't leverage down to one or two people who are in charge of kind of promoting Saline. This is something that is more broad and again, not only broad but consistent across in terms of the themes associated with our community.
Additional questions for Mr. Graydon or for staff? No? Okay, thank you, Mr. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Roth.
I was wondering who the other parties are that's going to contribute to this.
As of right now, the school district, the Saline District Library, if the council were to move tonight, Michigan Main Street, we have also approached the Realtors Association to contribute as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graydon. Appreciate you being here this evening. Okay. Any additional discussion regarding this motion? Okay. Then it's been properly moved by Mr. Burgoyne and seconded by Mr. Gearbaugh to acknowledge receipt and authorize with the addendum language indicating that funds will come from EDC Community Promotions. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Moving on to discussion items, commission or committee reports. Mr. Peters.
Yes, I have some park news. I'd like to say that Brecken Park will have 3 events on one day. On May 4th, we will have a park cleanup starting at 9 a.m. We'll also have an Arbor Day tree planting celebration at noon, and we'll have a ribbon cutting for the Brecken Library non-motorized trail. So it should be a full day. And on May 19th at Colony Park, that's a Sunday, there's going to be a mustard garlic weed pull. That's from 11 to 2. And we'll have coffee and donuts. It's really kind of a lot of fun. And the public's invited to come on down and help us try to control this invasive species.
Hot dogs.
And hot dogs? Okay. Mr. Kreitz, anything else you'd like to add to those two?
Hot dogs with mustard that day.
I'll be there. And one more item, and that is I have to say thank you to the Huron Valley Archaeological Society. As you all know, the French explorers came into this area in 1634, and they discovered some salt springs, and they named the area Saline. That's how our town gets its name. And since then, we've discovered a still active working salt spring here on some city property, and we're attempting to make it a history walking trail area. And the Huron Valley Archaeological Society last Wednesday was good enough. They sent down 2 archaeologists, 1 anthropologist, and our own Bob Lane, who is a senior member of the Saline Historic Area Society. He led the tour, and they established and they indeed certified it was a legitimate geological salt spring. So it's a big step. That in conjunction with our 2 independent water tests that indicate it is indeed a salt spring. It's actually a little bit saltier than seawater. So I want to say thanks again to Huron Valley Archaeological Society. And the purpose of that trip was to really certify that it was the real thing and to establish a game plan in the future to come down. They want to do some archaeological digs and some exploration. So again, thanks for their free service.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Additional commission committee reports. Mr. Rhodes.
The Environmental Commission is sponsoring an electronic waste recycling event to be held here at City Hall in the parking lot, not inside the building, in the parking lot, on April 27th from 9 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Bring your old computers, cell phones, big old televisions, whatever. You do not have to be a resident of the city to participate, and it is free of charge. Donations, however, are accepted. And the Environmental Commission will hand out seedlings to the first 200 individuals who attend. And if there are some seedlings left at the end of the day, we will participate with Parks in their dedication of the trail at Brecken.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Additional commission and committee reports? No? Moving on to reports and other announcements. I'd just like to say, and I mentioned this earlier, I think at the beginning of the meeting, that many of us attended the Michigan Municipal League Capital Conference that took place last Tuesday and last Wednesday. I was there, Mr. Peters was there, Mr. Roth was there, Mr. Rhodes was there. and Mr. Campbell was there. And I know we talked about sharing some of the insights and perspectives, excuse me, and knowledge that we gained. I'm hoping that if my colleagues are amenable to this, that perhaps you could email me your observations or email the clerk your observations, and we could put it into one document and then have it available for distribution at our next council meeting, if that's acceptable to everybody. Mr. Rhodes, would that work for you?
Yes, that's
Okay.
fine, thank you.
Mr. Roth?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Peters?
Absolutely.
Very good. Mr. Campbell, you okay with that? Okay, very good. Any other announcements? No? Okay. Then we move on to sidewalk survey and enforcement. Mr. Campbell, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. It's been a long time coming, but we did begin last Friday, I believe, for our sidewalk inventory. And moving forward on that, it's obviously a little bit of a time-consuming process as we gather the appropriate information so we can determine how best to determine how we the frequency or the prioritization of repairing the sidewalks. So it is underway, and if anybody had any detailed questions on the exact inventory and how we're going about it, Mr. Fordyce can certainly answer those questions.
Any questions or comments?
I just have one
Yep,
comment.
please.
Bad sidewalks and potholes are like, like dandelions. You never really win the fight. You just keep fighting it. But I was wondering, Mr. Fordyce, is it about $9 a square foot to replace sidewalk? And I guess my real question is, what's our budget? Do we have a designated budget to address just sidewalk issues? Perhaps we could pick the worst of the worst and fix them this year and try again next year.
$9 per square foot is probably a little high from what we've experienced.
That's with sand and a little bit of reinforcement.
Yeah. It depends on the size of the project. Obviously, we get a better unit price if we're doing more. So we've had some projects in the past that have come in closer to $6 per square foot. But a small, if you're just replacing one flag, it'd probably be more near that $9 mark. In terms of a budget, there is a small amount of money in the sidewalk budgets set aside currently for repair, and we have some in-house capabilities in sidewalk repair too. So there is a little bit of money available in the current budget year for that, so we can do that. But one of the challenges that we face is the construct of our charter and our ordinance, so that basically that money would be available for sidewalk repairs that are city responsibility.
Right.
So we would be limited to those areas, and sometimes it doesn't make an awful lot of logistical sense to address the city responsibility while right immediately adjacent to it is a property owner responsibility.
I understand.
So there is, certainly there is some funding available to address a small number of problems in the sidewalks, and if we want to go about it according to the book, then we're limited to those spots that are directly city responsibility.
Thank you.
Mr. Burgoyne?
In conjunction with sidewalks, I think that we have a non-motorized pathway master plan, and part of that goes along the cemetery. I would like to see staff take a look to see if there's either money from the county, the way some money was obtained for the path near the library, or somewhere else in conjunction with some TIFA money. And when that sidewalk is in disrepair, and it is city sidewalk, and I would want to have it made into a wide enough path so that it fits the master plan rather than, spot repairs and so forth. And the other thing that happens is that there's an issue near the dam, two issues. That bridge at some point is going to need to be upgraded or replaced by the state. And I think we should, and also the lanes converge there, which is right at the spot that you turn into Curtis Park, which is, in the future, at some point, there will have to be more width, because that's not the safest way to end that. So I'd like to, in terms of the sidewalks only, I would like to have some thought put into continuing the non-motorized, and where it's in such disrepair, to make that non-motorized upon replacement, if that's the city's portion, do it with TIFA funds, but then also try to lengthen it out to connect the west end, because I see a lot of people trying to either bicycle or walk or so forth, and they get splashed, or it's, you know, close to the road. And the places like Mickey's Dairy, Twist, and so forth, probably businesses at that end would be helped if there were non-motorized. So I think you can't do everything at once, but is there any possibility of matching funds? I'd be happy if that were looked at.
Yeah. The county funds that we utilized for the Library Brecon Trail or from a particular grant program they have going, and I don't believe that they would look too highly upon that stretch of pathway there. We have done a lot of planning for that.
Wait, they look highly upon any match, and the city was able to provide a match, and they, just as long as you used it, they were very happy to get a match. And we have TIFA funds that match, so I wouldn't say that they wouldn't consider it.
I'm sure they would consider it, but we have done a fair amount of planning for that particular stretch of sidewalk along the cemetery there, working with MDOT. When Gary planned out the retaining wall and expansion of the cemetery crypts, location and accommodating the non-motorized pathway that's envisioned in the transportation plan, that was a key component in how that wall was laid out. It's been a part of our discussions with MDOT on their redesign and reconstruction of 12, and that construction date is continually difficult to nail down and moves frequently, but it seems to be becoming a little more nailed down, and hopefully within 5 years they'll be doing that reconstruction. And
but couldn't we do our piece of non-motorized first?
Not really. Because there's proposed grade changes to US 12 there for sightline reasons, and that's still in design right now as to what the final grade there is going to be. So if we went through and did our best grade with the existing situation, it probably would not be a good grade after MDOT was done reconstructing 12.
Could you do north of the cemetery entrance to downtown without harming their project?
It's difficult to say. The closer you get to downtown, the less likely grade changes are, certainly. And then additionally, in those discussions, we did talk about the bridge and the merging of the lanes and doing as much as possible with the current project limits that they have to do something that makes that bridge more pedestrian friendly.
Mr. Campbell, do you want to make one more comment regarding the sidewalk inventory?
Just that hopefully that will be completed in the next few months, and then we're bringing that back again for further discussion on how best to proceed as far as funding and the like. Staff will be, during that time while it's going on, we'll also be looking at possible recommendations to make to City Council along those lines. So, stand by, as they say, and we will have some information recommendations to bring to council in the not too distant future.
Mr. Roth.
The discussion item talks about as far as survey and enforcement. I'd like to have some comments about, since we have ordinances regarding enforcement, where do we stand where repair is desperately needed?
Do you want to take that one?
Well, there's a number of sidewalks around the community that are desperately needed. And so that's why we believe that we need to do this survey, this inventory, because if we require one property owner to do it and there's somebody that has just as equal or worse and maybe we haven't seen it, haven't caught it, whatever. I mean, we don't have a lot of leverage to make them repair if we're not. So that's why we're trying to establish what exactly we have, how big of a problem we have out there, so then we can move forward and get those repaired.
Is our liability increased when somebody points out the hazardous conditions and we didn't make immediate attention to it?
We are moving forward, trying to get a handle on all of our problems. So we are being proactive to try and do that.
Mr. Burgoyne?
What's the current state law on the pushed out of place vertical distance? Is that 1 inch, 2 inch? What is that?
2 inches.
2 inches. So if something is more than 2 inches displaced from the next sidewalk piece, that's a hazard. And it could be a hazard before that, but definitely at 2 there.
Anything else? No? Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Okay, we move on to two final discussion items prior to reconvening into closed session. Mr. Burgoyne, you had a discussion item regarding maintenance.
Yes. The maintenance items that I see are at Storage Pros, right in front of Storage Pros. There are a bunch of acorn lights over there, and they've been in quite bad disrepair. I know they're on private property. They're the entrance of the community, though, and it doesn't look as good when they're in disrepair.
Okay, we can follow up on that.
The other item actually is a city item. On the southwest parking lot, the city's southwest parking lot next to Benny's, the sign announcing the parking lot has been a kilter for about a year. Now that the ground's not frozen, I don't think it'd be a big job to just make it be vertical and nice.
Mr. Fordyce, can you look into that, please? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne.
And then the other thing, one more thing I'd like to mention. Earlier tonight, somebody said that farmers markets cost, we're going out of taxes. This is tax money we're talking about. Actually, I happen to know that for many years, the farmers market has been in balance. What they've taken in as fees, they've used as expenditures. So that zero tax dollars from the outside, from the citizens, have been used there, to my knowledge.
Was that your second discussion
No.
regarding media reporting?
No.
Oh, okay. No, but duly noted, and you're absolutely correct. If you don't have anything further on maintenance, do you want to move on to media reporting?
Yes, yes. Okay, actually, I'll pass this down. There's I didn't bring enough copies, I'm sorry. There's a report in the media talking about information that came from the city. And it seems to me that somehow we need to put out the best and truest information that we can so that citizens aren't off balance with the information. I think that particular article that I'm passing around gave a perspective that we are in a situation where we really aren't. So I think I'd like us, I don't know what we can do exactly except get all of the good information that we can and put out, be open and give good information to the media. And I was thinking about this. I happen to be a veteran, and when I served for this country, what I did is I served for freedom, free democracy, and that requires everybody having information. So I prefer not to have a standoffish kind of relationship from staff. I prefer if staff can talk to the council, council can talk to staff. Council has the right information, council understands what's going on, the media has the right information. I just have seen this as an issue.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Burgoyne, and I think that everybody in this room tonight would agree with you that part of what makes our community great and what makes our country great is the fact that we engage our citizens and inform them to the best of our ability, and providing them with honest information is a crucial component. I do have to tell you that I take a little bit of an issue with your statement that staff has been standoffish, because I have to say that as it relates specifically to this process of going over our amended budgets and talking specifically about tangible solutions to rectify our situation, I think that staff have been very accommodating and very helpful, and whatever scenarios or information we wanted them to provide, they've gone back and worked on it, and most importantly, they've provided it to us. So obviously, maybe we have a slight disagreement on how accommodating staff has been, but I think there's no disagreement on the fact that providing accurate information to our citizens and to the press specifically is vital. So I think when we are presented with opportunities and when we're questioned about issues by our constituents or by members of the press corps, we should give them the most up-to-date and honest information that we can. So I think we're in agreement on that.
I did notice one confusion, which kind of seemed to stick out, which is that the whole issue of the fire millage already being within our tax rate, and then using that fire millage again to double up the collection of that amount as a proposed way forward. I don't think that's right. I think if we want to say we want to raise the millage by $0.5 we should just say that. We shouldn't double count, and it's confusing.
Well, and I think there's some merit to that, and obviously you're aware because you were here at the time, or if you weren't here at the time, I know you were arriving shortly thereafter, that the voters approved in 1994 the special assessment trigger by which City Council could raise taxes to fund their portion, or our portion, excuse me, of the Saline Area Fire Department, and therefore free up the existing dollars in the general fund to be allocated elsewhere. But the process is a little bit convoluted, but your point is well taken.
Well, at that time, the millage has actually changed in Saline from the 1980s. It was at 8.6. In 96, it was at 17.3. And it's been in between. And at the time that was approved, the millage was 11. So that was changing it to 12. And now that we're at 15.53, that fire amount we put within the regular taxes because it's more efficient. It makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Burgoyne. Are there any additional comments? Okay, then we move on to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, you all serve well as council members. None of you are attorneys. I ask, would you please give this to our city attorney on the ordinances regarding broken, unsafe sidewalks? South Lewis is unwalkable safely. And I will not go into further things, but it is close to home and the council. It is a shame if I have to again spend money for an attorney's opinion when in fact it is a city ordinance. You all swore when you were elected to uphold the laws of the city. I see you procrastinating, which is only a thief of time, to say the study should be done in some months, and we'll try and find the money. But we can give $120,000 to cable, and we can do DARE, and we can do youth. As I said, my feet are the last mode of transportation that I and seniors have. If it's a green break, we heal quickly. If you're a senior and you fall, it could be a death sentence. This is your responsibility to have safe, walkable communities. You advertise walkable communities, but we talk about non-motorized trails. We talk about bicycle paths. I am asking again, please, ask the city attorney, of which apparently you'll be talking to later, give him, please, a copy of the ordinances for the attorney to address. I appreciate your work, as I put 22 years on city council. I promised and I swore to uphold the ordinances. And I know, Mr. Rhodes, you understand, I appreciate you as a council member. But there are problems with your sidewalk, and apparently the council doesn't want to address it, and that is why there is another piece of property that they feel will not be addressed because the council is not going to address it. I request again, the city attorney address the ordinances and the shall, not the months of a study. And where are we going to get the money? The other thing is, there are 2 no parking places in front of Mr. Grossman. If we could look at why.
There are additional public comments. I just need to state for the record here very quickly that, and these are facts, and facts are stubborn things. This council, as Mr. Campbell has just articulated, is in the process of doing, or the city rather, is in the process of doing a comprehensive analysis and study of all of our sidewalks. We hope that that study is completed in the next few months, at which time that study will come back to council for council to have a very thorough discussion about how to move forward, to make sure that this city is as walkable as we hope it is, and we hope that it will be. I also have to say that any suggestion, whether directly implied or indirectly implied, that impugns the integrity of a member of this legislative body is simply not appropriate. And no one is taking action here or engaging in inaction for the benefit of one council member. We are all committed to making sure this is a walkable, safe community, and we are moving forward in accomplishing that goal. Thank you. Mr. Rhodes.
If I could add one comment to that, since I was addressed by name. Mary Hess is referring to the sidewalk on South Lewis, which is beside the property that I own at 199 West Michigan Avenue. And it is true that this winter was hard on that sidewalk, and that sidewalk is scheduled for replacement when the weather warms up enough that it can be done properly.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Is there any other business to come before Saline City Council this evening? No, then upcoming meetings, we have a work meeting scheduled for 6:30, not 6 o'clock, on April the 29th. Then we have another work meeting at 6 p.m. on the 6th with our regular council meeting following that, and then a regular council meeting on May the 20th. At this time, I'm going to be seeking a motion to reconvene into closed session to consider some confidential material. But before I call the motion, I do want to indicate that although it's not clearly expressed on the agenda this evening, council will not be reconvening at the conclusion of closed session. So at this time, I would seek a motion to go into closed session to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute, in particular to consult with the city attorney for strategy and negotiation sessions connected with the negotiation of collective bargaining units. Excuse me.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Rhodes. The clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Gearbuck.
Yes.
Councilmember Burgoyne.
Yes.
Councilmember Roth.
Yes.
Councilmember Rhodes.
Yes.
Councilmember Peters.
Yes.
Councilmember Trahar is absent. Mayor Morrow.
Yes. We are convening into closed session then at 9:34 PM.